Good afternoon. We're going to continue. I'm going to introduce Reggie Royston. Reggie Royston is a grad student in African American Studies, department that's co-sponsoring the event, and he's been providing value in many different ways. We've been working together on constructing an online course for education of cyberculture, and he's been a real inspiration to me over the past 2 years that we've been working together. And he also created a hashtag for the conference. It's Swing Flow. It's the hashtag. And the other hashtag that's around is Include, and apparently there's a lot of Twitter discussion going on, so join in there. So this is the opening of the afternoon panel, and I give the word to Reggie Royston.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Again, my name is Reginald Royston. I'm a PhD student in the Department of African American Studies, and I'm a designated emphasis student with the Berkeley Center for New Media, all partners in the event today. And my research background is in diaspora studies. So I look at the concept of separation from original homeland of migrants. And part of what I'm really interested about Helen Milner's work here is she's talking about the digital divide that's bridged through the work of the UK online centers, which are a series of nonprofit social service organizations based in the UK. And so what they're doing is they're in the process of actually bringing people online, right? Helen Milner is the chief executive of the UK Online Centers and the Online Centers Foundation. And for 20 years, she's been involved in this process. She's been one of the pioneers, I guess, with e-education or online education in the UK, working with a group there called the Times Network, and in 1985, and also worked with the Online Centers Foundation. Let's see, with the Times Network, I think they brought their Learn Direct program. Is that right? Online Centers Foundation's Learn Direct program brought 3.5 million students over the course of its work since 2000. Has had 3.5 million students online. And she's also working with the University of Sutherland, University of Industry Pilot and Online program. So in her role with the Online Centers of UK, they've been bridging the gap, so to speak, between many digital divides. There's many divides, and she's going to talk about these: knowledge gap, ability gap, immigration status, so new migrants to the UK. And her goal in the next year, the organization's goal in the next year, is to bring one more million people online who are not using the internet for their benefit, right? So this organization consists of about 4,000 partner tech centers all throughout England and the UK, and bringing together seniors, bringing together young people, bringing together 50% of their clients live what we would say below the poverty line, do not have formal education or degrees, right, or professional degrees. So in terms of getting some work done, this is an excellent center. I think we have a lot to learn from it. So please welcome Helen Milner with me.
Thank you, Reggie. Actually, does this work? Yeah, it does work. Okay, great. Good. So thank you, Reggie. Thank you, Greg. Thank you for having me. I've worked in digital inclusion, I think, for about 6 years. Well, it was called digital inclusion for the last 6 years. I started working in the online education field in 1985. And when I kind of think about all the things that have been invented since then, I realize that I'm a super user, okay? I'm not a technologist, and I'm definitely not actually an educator. About 15 years ago, I decided if I could get to the person who made the decisions, then the world would be a better place. Yeah, naive, I know. But So that's what I try to do. I try to, you know, get to my MP, get to my minister, get to the Prime Minister, and say, I knew, you know, it's okay for teenagers, you know, old people think they know everything as well. So I thought I had the solution to help the UK get online. So we've been calling it digital inclusion for about the last 6 years, and I landed in DC on Saturday and started trying to get my head around what's going on in the US around digital inclusion. And I've decided from now on in, I'm going to call it digital equality. Because actually, what we're talking about is about equality and inequality. And that actually inclusion just makes it sound a bit softer. So anyway, digital equality, that's what I'm going to talk about. There's going to be lots of numbers in here, and I'm not a researcher and I'm not an academic, but what I am, I'm a chief executive running a business, so I need data to make the best decisions to make my business work better tomorrow. Okay, so that's why I've got data in here. So just over 2.2 billion people is the number of internet users in the world. That's 32.7% of the world's population. Okay, so when we're talking about whether or not Facebook is real or not, just think about 70% of the world's population has never, ever used the internet. And when, as I'm going to focus on now, really is about what we do in the UK or the US, let's remember there's the rest of the world out there, and so we're way ahead of all of them. So, thinking about the UK and the US, I had a look at how many more additional internet users we got online in the UK compared to the US. So between 2009 and 2011, in the UK it was 7.7% of the population got online, and in the US it was 2%. That's interesting. That's an interesting difference. I like to think that in the UK it's about us, about UK Online Centres. So what are we? We're government funded. We're now a social enterprise. We used to be a public body. 95% of our money comes from the government, and we coordinate a network of entirely independent centres around the UK. So what do? We provide them with a learning website and some online content that I'll talk to you about, national marketing campaigns and support for local events. We train staff, but very importantly, volunteers as well. So of that 4,300 venues, we only give grant money to about 1,000 of those venues. So when it's government funded, part of the funding goes to those centres in the network, but also it goes to us to make sure that we're inspiring and influencing other voluntary organisations to actually get into their community and help create digital equality. And we work with national partners like Facebook and Google and the BBC, who I'm sure you've heard of. So our strategy on a slide is we use technology to help people to get online, but we do it in local communities, and we do it at the biggest scale we possibly can. So we're a national organisation. I have 31 staff, but we do it at the local level. Everything that happens in that local community. So our job is to make sure that they can be as best as they can be. So one of those ideas I had that I thought I needed somebody to listen to was if the government could give me £30 million, then I would get them 1 million more people online. I would get 1 million people to become internet users for a cost of $50 a head. The government at that time, and also still now, wants to push more and more services online. We talk about something called channel shift, which is about taking people out of expensive face-to-face and telephone public services and getting them to interact online. So the main reason the government wants to do it, I believe, is to save money. So let's talk to them about money. But they also want to streamline processes so they can get people processed much more quickly. But they do want to improve the experience. And since about last December, they're beginning to talk about getting citizens to choose online public services because they are better for them. They are better services, better created. So how are we doing against that £30 million? So just before Gordon Brown lost office as Prime Minister, we persuaded him to give us £30 million to get 1 million people online. So we actually kicked that off on the 1st of April 2010, and we're about 15,000 people shy of our 1 million people. Yeah. So 1 million people get online. only 43% of them do channel shift, have actually exchanged one or more contacts with government from face-to-face or telephone to online. But of those 43%, they shift 3.8 contacts a month, right? So that is saving £157 million, which is about $205 million. So you can do the maths. You invest £30 million and you save £157 million. They should just give me more money, don't you think? Okay. I want to talk about people and I want to talk about technology in places because we're called UK Online Centres, which obviously is all just about bricks and mortar. Of course it isn't. Why do people need technology? Well, they don't. What do they need? They need access to good quality, convenient, reliable information and services. They need to pay taxes. They need to be educated. They need to drive their car legally. They need access to decent law services, to benefits and to jobs. That's what the government wants people to do. They also want to buy their groceries. They want to learn stuff. They want to find out the news. They want to have cheap goods. And the leisure stuff, they want to shop, they want to know if it's going to rain today, they want to catch up on TV, and they want to explore their hobbies. They're real people, all of us. We want to do all of those things, and we want to do more. We want to communicate with friends and family, and we want to be part of a community. Right. This is a chap called Tim. Rather ironically, it says Lorraine, because Lorraine is talking about how she helped her dad, Tim, get online through one of our UK Online Centres. So let's hope that this works.
Oh, I'm an old man, and it takes a lot to persuade me to do anything. I was putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. But more I put it off, is more she would keep asking more and more. So I said, that's it, I'm going to go and try and take her off my back.
Each week I bring the leaflets to the house. These are the times, Dad, these are the opening times. Every week I'll come. I said, Dad, I'm going to be there on such and such a day. He said he'll come. So this one particular day, he actually came, but he dropped me off outside and he turned back. So I was a bit disappointed, but I thought, you know, I can't force him. He'll do it in his own time. And lo and behold, that's what he did. When I wasn't around, he went by himself, and that was it. The seed was planted. After that, I didn't need to ask him. And I'm just glad, you know, he's met new people for a start. He's now learned how to go online. He's now learned how to... I mean, it sounds daft just turning on the laptop, which he couldn't even do before for somebody of his age. I think it's really... I think it's opened a new world for him, what he never knew about.
It keeps the brains ticking over, you know, and that's the most important thing. Yeah.
The first email he sent me, you know, I was amazed. You know, it said surprise, and when inside it said, I love you. So I've never deleted it. I've still got it, because I think I should frame it, really. Everybody wants your family to be able to access things, but even more so at that age, a lot of people, they're lonely, they're by themselves, but if they've got the internet in front of them, they're not. And that's the thing, it's not just about getting online, it's a whole new world for them. You know, meeting friends, groups, that's what it's all about. And I think you need to encourage them for that sort of purpose. UK Online Centres, they're all over. They're friendly, they're free. I mean, that's the main thing, that's all I need to say. Friendly and free. Did you think it was a fantastic idea in the end?
I think it was a fantastic idea.
And do you think I was right just this once?
I think so.
So I think one of the interesting things about what Tim was doing with his newfound skills is he was finding out about gardening, because he's obviously interested in gardening, and he was looking at news from Guyana, because he's from Guyana. So Tim is a whole person. He has many, many different needs, but one of those needs is to find out what's happening from the country where he came from. Why do we care about who uses the internet? Well, we're creating a new inequality. The problem is not just about the millions of people who are not using the internet. It's also about the millions of us who are using it all the time in everyday life for everything that we want to do. That we do a lot of research to try and help us build our business better. We know that internet users are more confident, happy, have a better quality of life, are more informed, and are more confident in their skills to get a new job. We know they communicate more. They're more connected to their local community, although when they're offline, they think they're more connected to their community as an offline individual. But once they get online, they actually realize they're more connected to their local community. They save money, and jobs are advertised online. And in the US, 80% of Fortune 500 companies have online-only job applications. So if you're unemployed, then actually not being online is actually a barrier to getting that job. And research I saw around the US says that students with broadband at home achieve 6 to 8% higher high school graduation rates. We interviewed UK employers about how they felt about the internet, and 72% of them won't even interview someone without entry-level internet skills. And the BCS, this is a really great bit of research if you're interested in these things, actually found out that the internet makes you happier. It makes you more happy than money. Right? Okay? So IT has a direct positive impact on life satisfaction, even when controlling for income and other factors. Okay? So we must do it. So 100 million Americans do not have home broadband, and 66 Americans are digitally illiterate. That's bigger than the entire population of the United Kingdom, and we think we're quite important. So you've got more people in the US who are digitally illiterate than we have people in our country. So in the UK, we have older people. We have more than half of the people with no qualifications have never used the internet, and 31% of people who earn less than £10,399. I actually don't care about the people who are older, who have good qualifications and who have a decent household income, because they can look after themselves. If we're talking about digital inequality, let's make sure the government intervention, the state intervention, and actually all of our efforts are targeted at those people who won't come out of digital poverty without the help and support of people like us. In the US, it's very, very similar. I just found this Pew Digital Differences report that was published earlier this month. I guess you've all read that. That showed, again, senior citizens, people with lower than high school education, and people with a household income of less than $30,000 are the people who are offline, who are non-internet users in the US. The other interesting group that you have here are the people who took the survey in Spanish. So for the first time, Pew offered people the opportunity to take the survey in Spanish, and they were also people who were higher up the scale of being offline. 1 in 5 American adults do not use the internet. So every time you're on a bus or on a tram, look around, and 1 out of every 5 of those people have never used the internet before. So that's a massive, massive issue. So if you live in Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, South Carolina, etc., you're much more likely to not be online. If you live in New Hampshire, New Jersey, Utah, Connecticut, Massachusetts, you will be online. So again, it's really important. I mean, I do exactly the same thing in the UK to make sure that we're targeting our efforts in the right place. But actually, you have only just over half of the people in Mississippi have ever used the internet. So that's similar to Lithuania, and to put that into perspective, the Gates Foundation invested £15.2 million in libraries in Lithuania to make libraries internet access points for the people of Lithuania. And you have almost exactly the same internet users in Mississippi as there are in Lithuania. I aspire to be down here, the Norways and the Australias of the world. Australia's actually just done that pretty quickly, but Norway, 97.2%. So if anybody ever says to you, oh, well, there's all those people, you know, who won't ever do it, just say, let's go to Norway and see what they say. When I ask them in Norway, what do you do about the people who aren't online, they say, what do you mean? We help them. You know, we help our mums and dads. That we don't actually allow anybody to not have access to digital services. as individuals, not as a government, as individuals, as citizens. So both the UK and the US, the main reason is lack of interest, or that is what people say, but actually a lot of it is about confidence. The US internet adoption has leveled off, therefore you need to do something about it. And in both countries, the rate of use by people already online is increasing rapidly. So if you look at the use of the internet in the US by race and ethnicity, it looks like this. If you look at it by household income, it looks like that. And why is there such a big difference between the UK and the US? So could you be achieving more if you copied something like we've been doing? So they're the three main barriers: access, motivation, skills, and confidence. So if we come back to places, so we have 3,800 community partners in places running internet digital literacy classes in pubs, in community centres, in libraries, in churches, in mosques, in youth groups, in buses, even in a barn. There's no such thing as a typical centre. Every single centre does something else. So what they've done is they've put technology, they've added it to what they already do. This isn't about creating a brand new network of shiny internet cafes where people get help and support to use the internet. This is about taking the internet, putting technology right in the heart of communities with community organisations that are already helping and supporting the people in those local communities. The only real strategic work we do around positioning of UK online centres is that we make sure that we serve the poorest communities in the UK, because that's where most digitally excluded people live. We get about 20 to 50 different organisations contacting us every single week to join our network. So actually having places who want to be part of the network is not a problem. Here are some of the places that I picked out for you. The Pakistani Welfare Association in Slough, family learning events at the Bangladeshi Islamic Centre as a UK Online Centre, the Somali Golden Centre of Opportunities in my hometown of Sheffield, the ISSE. I put that up there because I thought this is interesting that right there on their homepage they've got Malawi news, Zimbabwe news, Zambia news, sorry, Kenyan news, Zimbabwe news, shopping time. So what they're doing is, this is the website. It's not pretty, is it? But this is the website that they use to actually help their local community to get online and to get in contact with the people back home. Bangladeshi Youth and Cultural Centre. And this is the Migrants Resource Centre in London. An interesting story about the Migrants Resource Centre is it's very, very close to Westminster, which is obviously the seat of power in the UK. We're sometimes asked about, can you give us some centres for politicians to come and, launch something or have their photo taken? And we offered them the Migrants Resource Centre, and they said, oh, might be a bit political. Yeah, we went, yeah, there it is, get down there. The Migrants Resource Centre is open to everybody as long as you're a migrant, which I thought was great as well. And the brilliant thing is that when people arrive and they say, do you know how to use the internet? Sometimes they say no, so they take them into their UK Online Centre and start showing them the internet. They said, oh, yeah, I know how to do that. So, within a week, they were turned into volunteers to help other people. This is, not very pretty, but this is our monthly user stats. So about 25% of the people coming through our network are from ethnic minority communities, which is more than people aged over 65. So why do I want to be a centre? We provide them with learning games. So this is our learning website. So remember that this has now been road tested and prototyped with more than 1 million people. So we help people to do the very basics, keyboard and mouse, email, and then online basics. This is a screenshot from one of our games. So this is a mouse skills game. And this is online basics, which is the core curriculum for what we do. It's not perfect. If you're a pedagogist, you want to tweak it and tweak it and tweak it, you could. You could make it better. But again, like I said, 1 million people have now used this. And we're about to put it on any device, so we can have it as tablet friendly. And we're also doing some clever tech stuff, which means that you can access this learning content when you're not online. And then when you're online, it will sync all of your learner data. This learning content, the British government has spent millions of pounds to develop, and we're giving it to the US government for nothing. So I hope that means you'll get out of the starting gate much quicker. They've got to use it. We train staff and volunteers. We have an online course for volunteers called Digital Champion, and in the last year we've supported over 3,000 volunteers to do that course. And we also run face-to-face training. We've only just started doing that. We resisted for ages because we said we're a technology online company, therefore, but we realized that actually people do like to see other people. All of the centres you can find on the internet, but we also have a free phone and telephone number where you can phone up and find it. And all of that data is syndicated to companies and other organisations. So BT, that's a big telephone and broadband company. You can find a centre through there. So it's exactly the same database. It's just being accessed through different people's websites. This is the newgovernment.gov, the new government website with all the government data on it. And they also have the search facility on there. We have campaigns with people like the BBC, as I said, and others. And one example of that is Get Online Week. It's a campaign we've now been doing for 5 years. And in October 2010, we got 90,000 people were brand new users to the internet through partnership working. So we didn't pay for a penny of advertising, not 1 penny of advertising. And we got 90,000 people online because of the power of word of mouth and community when it's endorsed by these big company names. That's an example of some of the posters. I'm building a family tree. You never on your own. And of course, we have a Facebook site, a Twitter feed, and a YouTube channel. And we give out some grants. So in the last year, we've given out about £10 million of grants. That's just been cut. So this year, we're giving out £4 million of grants. But that's not a lot for a network of 4,300 partners, is it? Connect to Compete. Who's heard of Connect to Compete? C2C. Okay, one hand. One hand? Okay. So this is the US version of this. It's a £4 billion public-private non-profit initiative. I don't know, because I'm from the UK, but I have just been in DC, how much of that is actual cash. So, you know, some of it is going to be in kind. It's a national platform for digital opportunity, and it's very much focused on low-cost broadband and computers. And it's going to start with focusing on families with children with free school meals. And there will be digital literacy content. And as I said, we've offered all of our content for nothing to C2C. So the other thing I read on the internet is that in the US, you think that smartphones are going to be the answer. That obviously when you look at ethnicity and the use and ownership of smartphones, then actually this is a much more equal picture. However, if you're applying to one of those Fortune 500 companies for a job, are you going to do it on a smartphone? You know, if you want to do big, important things, do any of you use your smartphone or do you use your computer? You use your computer. Your smartphone is about the portability of it. So we may be creating a new form of digital poverty by saying, actually, those people who don't have broadband at home, those people who can't afford a computer, can actually have a slimmed-down version of the internet on their smartphone. Actually, I would say that maybe those 2 kids that were here at lunchtime could actually just build some apps so that we can do everything that we need to do on smartphones, and then we'll be all right. Of course, I'm a technology evangelist, but I want to just make it clear that I don't believe that technology changes everything. I read The Great Gatsby. It's one of my favorite books. I love having it on my smartphone in my pocket so I can read it on the bus, but actually the most important thing is it's a really great book that Scott Fitzgerald wrote. The picture in the middle is a photo of my son, who's now 22, and my late father. I love the fact that I could scan it in and I can put it on my phone and I can have it on my desktop on my laptop. But the most important thing is I love my family. The last page is from the government website. I have to pay tax to drive my car. I don't like paying tax to drive my car. I pay enough taxes. But if I want to do it, I want to do it on a Sunday evening when it's raining using the internet. So those interactions are not different because of the internet. It just makes it easier. The goal is about getting people to use the internet and to make sure it has a positive and transformative impact on them and their lives. So what's my job left? Well, I obviously need to get the next 15,000 online. and then I need to persuade the government to give us another £30 million. I'm trying. I'm there. I'm working on it. So just finally, coming back to people, I just want to talk to you about Anne Wallace very quickly. So Anne Wallace is one of the most inspiring people I've met in a long time. And I have a question for the academics here, because Anne Wallace is amazing. She actually owns a fish and chip shop. Okay, I guess for you guys, how quaint, English. She owns a fish and chip shop. She inherited the fish and chip shop from her father when he died. And she decided that she would sell it and then retire and move to Spain. That's what people, but I guess it's like Florida here, you know, that's what people do. So she asked her staff, this fish and chip shop is in a very rundown area of Stockport, which is near Manchester. So she asked her staff, what did they think about that? She had about 8 staff. And they said, don't worry, Anne, we'll run it for you. She took one look at these kids in this fish and chip shop and she went, no way, I'm not going to leave my business in your hands unless you know more about running a business. So she decided to get the college in to train them up about how to run a business, how to be better at running a fish and chip shop. She then realized that this training thing had something in it. She then asked the community what they wanted, and they said a cafe. So she opened a cafe. She mortgaged her house and opened a cafe because the precinct that her fish and chip shop was on was going down and down. Every shop was closing, closing, closing. It was getting empty. So she opened a cafe. The college gave her some computers. She put the computers in and she became a UK Online Centre. She's phenomenal. Every spring she gets 12 kids who've been unemployed for more than a year who have no qualifications, and she turns them around. She gives them work, she gives them training, she gives them skills, she gives them ambition, and she gives them opportunity. The inspiring thing about Anne Wallace was she worked in that fish and chip shop for 40 years and hated every day. Okay? She has a brother. Her father said to her, asked her brother if he wanted to run a chain of fish and chip shops, and he said, not bloody likely. Okay? So the father wanted a chain of fish and chip shops, and he wanted his son to be in charge of them. When he said no, that was it. Anne was a girl. Anne had no chance. Anne couldn't run a fish and chip shop. So for 40 years, she worked in this fish and chip shop until the day he died. And then she realized she had opportunity. She had ambition. And she could actually change her community for good. Her daughter turned around to her, her daughter runs the UK Online Centre, and we were having coffee one day, and she said to her mum, hey mum, when did you get a social conscience? She was aged 55. And it was because she could, because the oppressor, I guess, her father, had died. She, she had opportunity. She had, financial opportunity. She had a bit of money in her pocket. But what I want to know is, why did Anne Wallace wait 54 years to make a difference to her own life and to the community that she lives in? And I think if we work out the answer to that question, then actually all of the issues we're talking about today, including digital inequality and digital equality, we can actually tackle. So it's not about technology, it's not about places, it's not about government money, although of course it helps. It's all about people, the people who are digitally impoverished, but also about those people who are helping them to make it happen. Thank you very much.
And this is a very beautiful presentation. Thank you for bringing your observations to us. It was really inspiring here.
Yeah, it was a great presentation. Thank you. I was wondering, do you have a curriculum, some sort of pedagogy? Are you working on it, I imagine? And then also, how do you measure success? You know, there's a lot of discussion in the national public policy circles today, like with the BTOP, or national investment. And there's a question of how do you measure that? Is it by subscribership or just that you introduce people? What's your measure for the million people?
We measure in 3 different ways. So our core metric is, so actually they're getting 30 million, getting 1 million people online for £30 million. I was sitting down with a colleague who was at that time inside government. And he said, I'm going to Downing Street tonight. Have you got an audacious ask? And I said, yeah, I'll get 1 million people online for £40 million. He went, that's a bit much. I went, how about £30 million? I went, okay then. So it was about keeping it simple. So we then had to explain what getting 1 million people online would be about. So we built into our content, our online content, which is where the curriculum sits, a way of registering, of counting people that we register. But obviously, that's not particularly deep. So as far as the politicians are concerned, that's enough. But what we do is we also have surveys. So I put some stats up there from surveys. We survey everybody when they start, and then we survey them after 3 to 6 months. We obviously work incredibly hard to make sure that they get an email address when they first come to us. So then, of course, we can survey them in all kinds of different ways. And then the follow-up survey is what we call a progression survey. So we look at, have they got a job? Have they done any volunteering? Have they started any activism in their local community? Have they accessed government websites? Have they switched contacts from offline to online contacts with government? Have they gone on to do a formal piece of education or another informal piece of education in their local community? So, I mean, you'll all know from surveys you need to keep it as short as possible. So we have lots of fights about, which questions go on. The great news about our survey data is that we have it now for quite a long time. We have about 5 or 6 years of the same question, so we can plot the improvement. We also each year invest in a single piece of research. So we then work with researchers in universities to then actually evaluate what we do around a specific theme. And so this year we're looking at the impact of technology on communities and social action, community action, and about whether or not we can take, I guess like Anne Wallace to a certain degree, that how much can we, how far along the digital activist journey can we take someone from nothing to activism. The interest is at the social impact end, so they could already be online and then actually use the technology for greater community impact. But we also are interested in that whole journey. So it's kind of who's it for, the evaluation. So we do it for ourselves because we have got questions that we have about the work that we do, but we also do it for the politicians. Talking about providing evidence for politicians is that I've found over the years of persuading them to give me money is that they either like stats, so they like all the numbers stuff, or they like the case studies, they like the stories. So, basically I go with both. So if I find them kind of glazing over when I'm giving them my stats, then I tell them a few stories and vice versa. Curriculum, there's a curriculum in here. It's really simple. It's keyboard, mouse, email, search, internet safety, and then we have something around online public services as well because that's why we've got the money. The hard bit, because it's online learning, which is all supported by volunteers and some paid staff, is that the real learning happens when you implement it, when you practice, when you apply it. And so how do we make sure that we put enough triggers and enough flags in it to make sure that the volunteers and the people working in the centres work hard to say, now let's send an email to each other, or now let's go online and search for something that you're interested in. So because that's actually where the real deep learning happens. And that's really hard to do in online learning by itself, particularly for people who by de facto have really low internet skills to start with anyway.
It was your presentation, I thought it was very good. On one of the charts you were showing different countries, it seems like California was a state.
States, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of more literate than any parts of our nation. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, thank you. First of all, I'm thanking her for the overall presentation. There's some slides that are sticking in my mind. One was California, and then your comparisons with Mississippi, Alabama, and the South. The other one was when you went globally, I saw on the spectrum that Africa was at the far end of that spectrum, and I wanted to hear more about that. I know South Africa has more PC involvement. on the continent of Africa than most other nations. But I also know there's sizable Africans that are in London itself, you know, Peckham, other places I've seen, particularly the ones I was hanging out with Nigerians. And so I'm kind of curious at how that translates to getting the information back to their home nations.
It's a good question. California is just above average. So California was on the bottom end of the most connected states, or the most digitally literate states. I put it on there because we're in California. I thought you might be interested. The question about Africa is a really good one. I mean, the other thing to look at, I think, is China. And the growth in internet users in China is phenomenal. I mean, absolutely phenomenal. They have gone from something like 5% to 30-odd% in 5 years. So when something happens, you know, when you've got that trigger, then it really happens. Internet languages, 25% of people on the internet are on the internet in English. 25% of people on the internet are on the internet in Chinese. And all other languages are less than 10% on the internet. Okay, so again, thinking about people of different cultures and what languages they're using. That obviously the Chinese are using Chinese, but most other cultures are using English on the internet, the language of the internet. With work with Africa, that in the centres, I tend to see them more digesting information than receiving news. They're reading about their countries rather than communicating with people in their countries. In Pakistan, there's a lot of people who actually go to a local internet cafe and who do Skype sessions. So they do Skype sessions in our centres, and their relatives that they've written them a good old-fashioned letter and said at 6 p.m. on this date, I'm going to ring you at the internet cafe. And they actually go to an internet cafe and look at that. I'm doing some work with some people in the UK, other foundations who are looking at Africa, particularly around creating hubs. But that's much more about the top end. Yes, that's about creating really good quality internet access in a hub in somewhere like Liberia, that they're setting up one in Liberia. There's one in Kenya as well. Kenya's slightly more advanced. But that's about getting the people who have the passion, the ambition, some technology skills to make sure they get access to the best tools, so the best high-speed broadband, which is very, very different to the kind of work that I'm talking about here in our developed countries, which is about saying, let's get the bottom 20% and get them digital literacy skills. In Africa, the work that we're working with mostly is about actually getting the people who are most digitally literate the best tools so they can create tools and products and democracy sites for the people of their countries. So that there are two quite different things, but both really, really important.
One more brief question, maybe you can take a break and go to the next panel. But you're still on? You still have your question?
Yeah, I was just going to ask if there's information about folks from various disability communities and maybe how assistive technology has been used or been helpful.
Yeah. So you probably saw about 23%, again, almost a quarter of our learners come from disability communities. And it's very similar to the ethnic minority communities. It's about centres who have a specialism in supporting them. Assistive technologies is part of the answer. I think the issue around assistive technologies is that there's absolutely no way we could afford, any of us could afford to equip 4,000 centres with all of the assistive technology that they would need to support all the different disabilities. So the route we've gone down is that we have around 250 centres who specialise in supporting people with disabilities, but they may be different kinds of disabilities. So one may be specifically for blind and partially sighted people. Another one would be for people who have suffered dramatic mental health issues. So that you have, I mean, this is the model, is that we work with people in the community who have the expertise to support the people who are most offline. We've just created a new specialist network for disability, actually, because almost half of the people in the UK who are disabled are not online. It's a massive, massive number of people statistically, and we absolutely wanted to make sure that we are providing them with different products. What we're doing is actually going to the technology industry and saying, we want you to give those centres your products. Or at least give them an incredibly, you know, an amazing discount, because they're creating the internet users of your products. Therefore, you should be funding them. So that's where we're at with them at the minute.
Thank you. One more question, and then let's break for the next panel.
Cool. Well, thanks for the presentation. Sounds like you guys are doing some really amazing work. My question is about the economic development angle. So we're planning a similar project to what you're doing over in Oakland for this summer, but we're focusing on, one, getting folks who have basic technology skills, to primarily young people, to actually teach and work with local small businesses that are in East or West Oakland that have been around for a long time, but they don't have the technology, and they need to get these skills to be found so they can actually sell their merchandise. And what that looks like, or if there's a piece involved with that with the UK centers, but also developing a pipeline between these folks that do have these new technology skills with corporations or organizations that can hire them for long-term development. And just any tips you can recommend with that would be helpful.
It's a really good idea. I mean, one thing kind of hot off the press is that one of our big banks is actually going to fund a program to help small businesses set up a better digital web presence. That around 66% of the small businesses in the UK don't have a website. Which is, I mean, so many of the stats I'm finding are so similar that I imagine it's probably the same here. The only thing I'd say, I mean, obviously the lovely young people who just said buckle down earlier, which is obviously the best advice we've had all day, is that not always projects involving young people teaching older people to do things work, yeah, and that there's in the UK quite a lot of people go, hey, let's just get some young people and they'll get some old people and everything will be okay. That we in Sheffield, one of our partner centres, work with 6 schools and Get Online Week, and that was mostly good. It was events based, so it was very much about, this is an event, you know, use it or lose it, which I think is actually something that works really well for us, which is why we have Get Online Week. We sort of pretend it's your last chance to get on the internet. Of those 6 schools, only one of them still runs those sessions, because it was just really hard. And the young people couldn't understand why the older people didn't get it. You know, you run a session, you explain what an email is, you write down their email address, they come back the next week and they say, what's an email address? Yeah? That you need extraordinary patience, and of course lots of young people do it wonderfully, but not every young person, just because they have a smartphone, therefore is good at teaching people who have absolutely no idea what the internet is. So I guess that would be my only thing, is maybe with the young people set up an absolute realistic expectation about what's expected of them, how long it's going to take them, you know, that they shouldn't just sit down and program a web page and then bugger off again. You know, that actually it's about teaching them, it's a sustainable skill. Like, get those small businesses to develop those skills themselves, which will take loads longer than getting the young people to actually create them, the digital tools that they think they're after. So I guess that would probably be my one bit of advice, is about sustainability.
On that note, let's sustain ourselves with some coffee, tea, and libraries.